Rhys Morgan, welcome. Good to have you.
Good to see you, Pete.
Rhys, what projects are you working on at the moment? And within those projects, what are you seeing in terms of buyer psychology?
We're working on a wide range of projects, mostly across Sydney, but one down in Melbourne as well. Um, Across those projects, there's a combination of what we call completed stock. So this is new developments we're talking about and versus off the plan. We've seen most activity in the completed residual stock. And I guess the reason for that is that they were priced in the last construction cycle. So comparatively, they're a bit more affordable than the brand new product that's coming online, factoring in the new construction prices, and people really taking an opportunity to absorb that last remaining residual stock from the last cycle. So we've seen lots of downsizes. That's not just referring to people going into retirement age. Obviously, we've been under a high rate of mortgage stress. And so a lot of people are just downsizing their mortgages.
Oh,
They might
wow.
be going from a house or a larger apartment and trying to find something more affordable so that they can survive through this period, I guess.
So, in terms of the first element, people seeing value in residual stock,
Yes.
is that really people that are in market that are seeing that value, or people taking an opportunity as an investor saying that looks pretty cheap because it's priced from the previous cycle?
It's a bit of both. I think now that the new projects are coming online and people comparing to that, they're realizing the value. It's very hard to convince people to buy a brand new property today because the price gap is so extreme, I
Yep.
guess, to the new stuff. So when you compare that to something that was has got residual, I think there's a huge opportunity there, and I think we'll see the absorption of all that residual stock this year, and then my bet would be that you're going to see a rise in apartments prices generally across Sydney, as the cost of the replacement cost of any apartment is now so much higher than what we're currently selling them for. So I think there's a huge opportunity out there for people to buy apartments.
We speak about downsizers and the fact that the changing demographic, people are selling the home and moving into an apartment. Give us a little bit more of a client perspective, because you see and talk to a lot of clients, what they're looking for when they're downsizing, what works and what doesn't from a layout perspective.
Well, I mean, a lot of people say downsizing, but then they come asking us for their largest apartment, which is quite interesting. And if you speak to anyone, what they really want is size, right? But size and budget need to be brought together, because someone will come to me and say, well, what's the biggest apartment you have? And I'll say, oh, fantastic. We've got something at 200 square meters. Great. And how much is that? Well, that's $4 million. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we really then now need to adjust people's expectations of what they're looking for to the budget that they can afford. So really, that's really what's determining their decisions at the moment.
And what's the sweet spot? Is it kind of your 3-bedroom apartment that's about 100, 120 square meters?
Yeah, I think 100 square meter, 3 beds is a great spot, or a 2-bedroom plus a study. And they're using that study room for any multi-purpose. Usually got a couple together.
Yep.
If they want to keep that room as for when one of the kids wants to come and sleep over for a week or something like that, or use it as a study, then that's really where we're seeing the expectations.
And the downsizer that's coming into a 2-bed plus study or a 3-bedroom apartment, what else is a non-negotiable for them? What are the key things that rank high in the amenity list for them to make it work?
Well, I think that work from home space has become really critical to most buyers, whether that's in the apartment itself or the new building that it might be coming with might come equipped with that kind of amenity as part of the space. Parking has always been essential. We've got lots of people that need to still drive around Sydney. So if it's a 3-bedroom apartment, they're looking for 2 parking spaces. And yeah, even the 2 beds, ones are non-negotiable now. Yeah.
I recently spoke to Stuart Ayres, who's the CEO of the UDIA New South Wales, and we were talking about planning and feasibility is getting blown out and just things really not stacking up for a lot of developers. You've seen a lot of cycles. Run me through the cycles that you've seen and where you think we are now, and what will come back and what probably won't come back.
Well, what I foresee at the moment is there's been a huge discussion, I'm sure you spoke about it with Stuart, is that we need to get more supply, right? And the focus at the moment is how do we get more approvals? And I can see that, you know, government bodies like the UDIA are working closely, and they're going to eventually solve this issue. And we're going to start seeing large scale approvals, but it doesn't mean we're going to see a lot more buildings start until that we've got a demand that can meet that new supply that's going to come online as well. And so I still think that we're going to need to find a way to make these developments stack up to people to purchase them.
Yeah.
Whether we need to see a reduction in the cost of construction, and I don't know see how that's possible right now, but you know, whether that's manufactured housing or which is still currently more expensive than building on site, but you know, overseas, there's examples of the ways that that can be done. We watched in COVID how China built hospitals in, you know, 2 weeks or whatever it was.
Yeah.
There must be a way that we can advance our technology and our learnings from that to start doing some of that stuff here. Or we need to find ways to bring the demand of people with a better budget to come buy these properties, because it is more expensive than a resale property. And I don't understand. We've kind of over the last couple of years, we've chased away a lot of investors,
Yeah.
local and foreign. And I think, you know, what we saw in the last cycle, which was key to creating a lot of supply, is that we had a huge amount of foreign investment in new developments, not talking about resale apartments. And so what that meant was that we have people that come to this country on, you know, temporary visas or looking to get permanent. But, you know, there's 1.6 million people, I think, at any one time that have a temporary visa in Australia. We then have taxed them, you know, with surcharges, and we've put the FIRB board in the way to stop them from purchasing even new homes now, really to an extent. And so they're not creating the new supply for themselves. So they're just becoming a burden on the existing rental supply. I think, you know, if we looked at, you know, encouraging foreign investment, then currently we're going to create all this onshore supply, you know, and they'll be able to house themselves. And then after their time here in Australia, if they decide to then go home, the asset gets to stay here and the money stays here. And you know, that has downward pressure on the rental pool, because there's going to be more and more apartments that are available for Australians to rent. And we're not talking about them buying existing properties. We're just talking about new properties here that's going to you know, increase the supply and contribute to all the infrastructure costs that we have here in Australia as well.
I'm so glad you raised that, because we've been talking about this for the past few episodes, that the foreign buyers are actually a solution to our housing issue, not a hindrance. And there's a big misconception that's very political. It's very sensitive, and it's been used as a political tool that these big, greedy foreign investors are here to buy your houses off you. When in reality, they want to bring their money to invest.
Correct.
They're going to invest in something that's likely to be a rental, because they're economic investors, and that increases our rental supply. And I'm glad you said it, because you see it.
Yeah.
Right. And what percentage of the foreign buyers that you've seen in previous cycles turn their purchase into an investment?
All of them, almost all of them, you know. And so, and we were so easy to demonize them, and from a political point of view, because they don't vote. So they're an easy target. They're the boogeyman that's causing the problem. It's not us, because, you know, us as a government haven't done the work to make housing affordable or increase the supply. And, you know, I even think about Trump economics, people saying, he says, well, we don't want foreigners. But actually, if you listen to what Donald Trump is saying, he's saying, we want people to move to America and build here.
Yeah.
He wants them to build factories here. Isn't that the same here for housing? We want foreigners to come here and help us build the housing, bring their money, and we can then benefit from this foreign investment rather than chasing them away. So yeah, I think there's the solution, because I saw it in the last cycle, is that's how everything was driving a lot of the development to being built. And that's why we had no supply issues back then. It kept a lot of the rental costs in check across Australia. And so, you know, the solution is actually sitting there. It just needs someone with the political will to actually put their hand up and to say, this is how we do it.
And the problem is they're going the other way. There's talk about banning foreign investors. There's surcharges that are there. Just again, I don't want to harp on this for too long, but tell me what that surcharge regime looks in reality. If I was buying $1 million apartment in Sydney and I'm not going to use Asia, let's say I'm an American,
Yep.
for example.
Yep.
What does it look like? What does the penalty look like for me to bring my money to Australia?
Well, the surcharge is another 8%. So your full cost is going to be somewhere around 13% stamp duty.
So 130 grand just in stamp duty.
That's right. And we're saying that you can only buy new. So a new property is probably going to be at least 20% more expensive than a resale, which they can't buy, which would have been 800,000. So really, you're talking about a $330,000 premium for a foreigner to purchase a property in Australia. And I think when that was introduced, the politicians at the time said, how good is this? They're not going to stop buying at all. You know, we're just going to increase all of our revenue here. And it's how fantastic is this going to be? But the opposite, it's just completely dried up.
Yep.
Now we've got no supply. We get no tax revenue from it at all. And no benefit.
And they're just going and buying property in Dubai or Abu Dhabi
That's
or
right.
Saudi Arabia, and they're building their economies and their housing
That's right.
supply, and we're missing out.
And maybe, you know, the investment that we saw in the last night, a lot of it was China centric. We're not suggesting that that's the solution going forward. There is, you know, there's other very large markets that want to come and invest in Australia. You mentioned the US. If you go over to Queenstown in New Zealand, you know, that connection with Silicon Valley and all the investment you see over there, there's really driven the depth of that market. There's a huge emerging Indian market, the Southeast Asia market. So really, we should, you know, just like we go out there and we promote tourism because we want people to come here and spend money, this is another version of that where we should be looking to really reach out to the world to come help solve our housing supply issues.
That's fantastic. Let's move on to the markets.
Yeah.
You tell me a little bit about your experience before I go into those markets. Give the context of kind of the markets that you've worked in, the projects that you've worked on, because I want to lay this up for us to then talk about what you're seeing in each market. So, what kind of projects have you been working with over the past? It's been more than a decade now, right?
Yeah. Started in about 2008. So, most of the projects have been of large scale, probably 300 to 500 be the average size of the project, mostly across Sydney for very reputable developers. And we've probably sold somewhere in the range of about 8,000 apartments, all new. And yeah, we've seen obviously very strong times back in 2012, 13, 14, 15. And over the last couple of years, again, it's been very weak in the new development market for a whole range of reasons.
What's the hottest market at the moment? Is it still Brisbane?
I think Brisbane will be very strong going into, you know, we've got the Olympics coming up. They've got the Cross River Rail that's coming into completion soon. But I think all of that growth in new developments in both Brisbane and Melbourne is going to be driven from Sydney because the investors here have made money because of the growth of Sydney. They've got much more equity in their existing properties if they already are an owner. Or it could be people rent vesting from Sydney where they're priced out of Sydney and they're looking to gain those opportunities in both Brisbane and Melbourne. Yeah.
Now, I've got to be careful how I ask this because asking you which project or which market you like is like asking you which of your children you love more.
Yeah.
Which market do you see the most upside, or what's kind of something that's been overlooked but you see a lot of value there in at the moment?
Well, I think Melbourne, they are at if we talk about the property clock and the lowest point being 6 o'clock right at the bottom, that's where they are at the moment. I think they've dropped to somewhere like 5th on the list of, you know, your price per city, Sydney, you know, Brisbane, Canberra, you know, they're right down there now, yet they're the same population size as Sydney. Sometimes you can use a different statistic to say that they're larger, but they're certainly still growing. And to suggest that, you know, for the last 50 years, it's been Sydney, Melbourne, 1, 2, and now suddenly they're the 5th most expensive city in Australia. Like that's an anomaly, and that's going to change. So finding the right opportunities to buy into Melbourne now, while it is somewhat depressed, you're going to see the most growth. But you know, Brisbane equally. I mean, they're coming off. They're probably at 9 o'clock. They've been seen a little bit of growth now, but they've still got a long way to go. So yeah, interesting to follow both. I think you'll get more immediate growth in Brisbane, but if you are really an astute long term investor, right now Melbourne's the place you want to look at.
Reese, what have you learnt about yourself as a leader over the past decade, building and starting and scaling and growing your business, and having worked through particularly the past 5 years that have been challenging for the development space? What have you learnt about yourself, and how are you coming out of that?
The most important trait that I've learnt in my time running my own company is the requirement for resilience, because and you just need to show up every day and be ready for the opportunities because they come. And sometimes you don't see them. Sometimes it looks really bleak. And we're spending more money than we're earning in some months, and you can see especially in project marketing, I've seen lots of businesses close up and fold around us. And I guess the opportunity there we can find is that our market share is growing because we're continuing to survive. But you've really got to have a grit and resilience to you, and you've got to embed that in your team. That even if you can't see it right now, the good times are coming. You just need to keep doing the work, keep providing the value, and the opportunities will be there on the other side.
I think that's a very good investment lesson too. You've seen a lot of investors come through, and that resilience as an investor also carries you through to the next cycle. Mate, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I wish you all the best of success. You're looking great.
Thank you, mate.
And we hope that 2025 is another year of success for you and your business.
Thank you. I hope it's a great year for you too.
Thank you.